Welcome back, everybody. In this episode, we are going to talk about action potentials. Oh, yeah, that's right, action potentials. Some people love them, some people hate them, but we all got them, and they're important. All right, don't let anybody tell you something different. Okay, all right, they're an important piece of work right here, important piece of knowledge that you need. To be any type of study in neuroscience type stuff, okay, or biology. All right, super important concept, and we're gonna go over it. And we touched upon it in the last video when we talked about the electrochemical impulses. Now let's just get in it. Let's see how this works and the different components, channels, and at the end we'll go over the graph. Super cool. Okay, cool. So when your neurons, right? Let's take for example this beautiful neuron that I drew just a second ago. When they're hanging out, they are at a certain resting membrane potential. And what that means is membrane potential is that there is a voltage difference between the inside, right? The inside, which is in right here, inside of the cell, and then everything on the outside of the cell or the outside of the neuron. I'm just going to get rid of that so it's not all yucky. All right, and I'll delete some more. Okay. So the difference between the inside and the outside, there's a different amount of these ions that cause either a negativity on the inside or negativity on the outside, positivity on the inside, positivity on the outside, whatever it is. So when there's a difference in that, there's a voltage difference, which gives you a membrane potential. Okay, so when your main homie neuron right here, let's call him Bob. When Bob is chilling on the couch eating Cheetos and Doritos and drinking pop and chilling, watching the football game, he is neither getting stimulated nor inhibited by any other neurons around. Okay, so that means Bob is just hanging out and he's resting. When Bob is resting, his entire membrane is at a certain voltage, right? His resting membrane potential, his membrane potential is at a certain voltage, and that magical number is negative. And it's negative because the inside of the cell is more negative, and that's how we do it. So negative 70 millivolts. And when it's calculated, the voltage difference, the membrane potential is at negative 70 millivolts when he's neither excited nor inhibited nor nothing, and everything is chilling. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, why is Bob so special? If Bob is just chilling, why is he not at equilibrium? Why is he not at zero, right? If everything's going and everything's everything is, there's nothing happening. He's not getting stimulated. He's not getting excited. He's not getting, any inhibition from any other neurons. Then why is he at negative 70? And why is he not at zero? Well, that's a great question. That brings us into our next point of discussion, which are these three types of channels that allow for the resting membrane potential to stay at negative 70 millivolts. And there is three of them that we're going to talk about, and they're super important for doing two things. Number one is keeping the inside negative. Okay, we want the inside negative, all right? Internal negativity. However you want to put it, however you want to remember that. The inside of that neuron is negative at resting, okay? So it's the resting membrane potential, negative 70, inside is negative. Okay, now that's one thing that these three channels do. And then another thing is that it defines the concentrations of these different ions, okay? It produces the relative concentrations of these different ions that we're about to talk about. Okay, now the first channel we're going to talk about is the sodium potassium ATPase. This dude right here. Okay, so this dude, let's take a look up here. This is a membrane. Okay, and this is the channel sodium potassium ATPase. This is the outside of the cell over here, and then this is the inside. Okay, so what the sodium potassium ATPase does is it uses ATP to kick out 3 sodium, and it brings in 2 potassium. Now, if you think about it, now you have one less positive ion on the inside. And what that means is that you are minus 1 on the inside, right? You just lost 1. So overall, you lost 1. Overall, you're negative 1, right? And this contributes to the negativity on the inside, right? That's one thing. Well, what it also does is it produces these relative concentrations on each side. So on the inside, you might kind of come to the conclusion that sodium is high concentration on the side, and then you also might come to the conclusion of what do you think is high concentration on the inside of the neuron? Well, that's right, potassium. And there's also potassium on the outside because it's getting pumped in, but it's relatively smaller. And same thing for sodium on the inside. Sodium is relatively smaller. Then you also have chloride. Chloride is, he hangs out with sodium, so he's relatively small on the inside and relatively larger on the outside. Now, that's one channel. Okay. Sodium, potassium, ATPase. Pumps 3 sodium out, 2 potassium in, and these are the relative concentrations that we see here. Lots of potassium on the inside, lots of sodium and chloride on the outside. All right, now two ways to just like remember these types of things. You can think of salty banana. All right, let me try to draw a banana here. Draw a banana, then you got a bunch of salt on the outside. Okay. Now, the banana, what does it have a lot of? It has lots of potassium, right? So you got potassium inside of the banana, and then the outside, right? It's a salty banana because you just sprinkled a bunch of salt on it. You have sodium chloride, right? Which is salt. Okay, so there's a lot of potassium inside and a lot of sodium chloride on the outside, and vice versa, right? There's still potassium on the outside, okay, but it's relatively smaller, and there's still sodium chloride on the inside, sodium and chloride on the inside, but it's relatively smaller. So that's one thing. And then for the pump, 3 out, 2 in, you're like sitting on a test, you're like, oh, does the sodium, potassium, ATPase pump potassium in or out? Well, the answer is in, and you can just remember pumpkin. Let me put that down just in case you guys can't see that top portion. There we go. You can remember pumpkin because you're pumping potassium in. Okay, that's how you know potassium's going in, and then you know that sodium is going out. Okay, and then in has 2 letters, so you're doing 2 potassium in, and then the other one has to be 3, so 3 sodium in. Those are 2 little bits to help you remember. So that is one of the channels. Now, let me do a little bit of cleaning here. Okay, so the sodium, potassium, ATPase, it pumps sodium out, pumps potassium in. It makes those relative concentrations where they are, and it makes the inside negative. Those are a few things. Kind of a big deal there, huh? But you also have two more channels that play a role in making the inside negative. The leaky potassium channels right here, and then the leaky sodium channels. Okay, leaky potassium channels, big deal. There's a bunch of them. Leaky sodium channels, not as big of a deal. There's a few of them comparatively, like few. Okay, so let's make it here. This is the leaky potassium channel. Now, where is there more potassium, inside or outside? I'll let you think about that. Ding, ding, ding. That is correct. There is more potassium on the inside. And these leaky channels, they are passive. They're just kind of leisurely open a little bit, and they allow potassium to leak along its concentration gradient. Now, if there's a bunch of potassium inside, where is it going to want to go, right? High concentration, low concentration, right? So it's going to go out. Okay, so it's going to go out. Now, when potassium is chilling inside, it's usually attached to something negative because it's positive, and it's an organic anion. So when it leaves this way, it's going to leave this behind. And what's that going to do to the inside of the cell? Yeah, it's going to make it more negative. Heck yeah, it's going to make it more negative. All right, so that is another contributing factor to making the inside negative, right? Sodium, potassium, ATPase. Let me draw these in so it's chilling here. for your reference. The leaky potassium channels. And then let's make these a triangle. This is the leaky sodium channels. Where is sodium more concentrated? Inside or out? Yes, on the outside. On the outside, there's more sodium. So it's gonna leak into the inside. Okay. Now sodium's going into the cell. What is that? What is that doing? That's making the inside more positive. That's kind of weird, right? If you're making the inside more positive, oh, that's a horrible N. I just don't know how to use this. Okay, I don't know how to draw. I don't know how to write. Today's a weird day. Maybe Bob can take over my job. Okay, sodium leaks into the cell, right? And there's a little bit of it, so it just kind of nudges it up. Well, the thing is, sodium potassium ATPase makes the inside kind of negative. The leaky potassium channel makes the inside super negative. So these two combined right here will bring it super down to say negative 90 millivolts. And the sodium will bring it back up, right? Because it's positive on the inside. It's leaking a little bit inside. And now it's at negative 70 millivolts. Ding, 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 ding. That's a magic number. And we're at resting potential. Okay, finally. Negative 70 millivolts through these three channels right here, these three bad boys. Okay, so these three homies, they're helping us out. They're getting us to negative 70. And that's why we're chilling there and at equilibrium. Because of those three channels. All right, cool. Now Bob is resting at negative 70. What's going to happen when he gets stimulated on his dendrites and maybe his cell body too, because that could happen there. So he's getting stimulated by other neurons. It could be one neuron zapping him a bunch of times, or it could be like 3, 4, 5 neurons ganging up on him, and they're all zapping him at the same time. But all of that stimulation summed together, right? They're all, combined together, get you, and they open up sodium channels, okay? Ligand-gated sodium channels, right? Because when they're not just zapping you with like electricity, there's synapses between, okay? There's synapses between the end of this neuron, which would be up here, okay? And Bob, there's synapses, there's little gaps. And along those gaps between these other neurons that are hanging out in front of Bob and Bob, there's this little gap. And they allow neurotransmitter to fall across, okay, to swim across that gap, hit Bob on one of his receptors, his ligand-gated receptors. Ligand-gated receptors just mean that it responds to a molecule, it responds to a neurotransmitter. And when that neurotransmitter binds from the other neuron that just released it, and it hits Bob, and that ligand receptor catches that neurotransmitter, it opens up sodium channels. And what do sodium channels? What are these ligand-gated sodium channels going to do? They're going to allow sodium in, because sodium wants to go down its concentration gradient. So it's going to allow sodium into the cell. Okay. Now, maybe if you're letting sodium in, just a little bit of sodium, it's going to get more positive, right? Or less negative, whichever way you want to think about it, is going to go to negative 69 millivolts, and then negative 68, and then negative 67, negative 65, and so on until it reaches a magic number where your homie Bob has enough courage, enough stimulation from other neurons to fire his own action potential, and that magic number is negative 55 millivolts. Okay, and negative 55 millivolts. That is when Bob is able to get his own action potential, and all this stimulation accumulates in a certain part of this neuron, which is the beginning of the axon, right in this area right here. Okay, kind of like the end of the cell body, beginning of the axon, and they call it the axon hillock. They, as in the neuro geniuses of the world, or the neuroscientists, those nerds. Just kidding. I'm sorry. All right. Little weird laugh there. Okay. Axon hillock. That's my evil laugh. Should have been an actor. But anyways, axon hillock. Okay. The accumulation of all that stimulation gets crazy enough to where you get to negative 55, and that's when the beginning of the action potential begins. All right, the beginning begins, whatever. Beginnings, the beginnings. And then you're able to fire an action potential that goes and then off to the next neuron. Okay, now let's go through the graphical representation of everything we just talked about here, okay? Because there's also the voltage gated channels that we want to talk about. Okay. Now, well, actually, no, let's stay here and we'll talk about the voltage gated sodium channels and potassium channels here. Okay, so when this stimulation gets crazy enough and you get to negative 55, that opens up the voltage right here at the exon helix. Okay, the voltage gated sodium channels. Okay, these voltage gated sodium channels open, and they're going to allow much more sodium to enter the cell. And what's that going to do? Oh, that's just going to shoot that negative 55 super positive all the way to positive 35 millivolts. Then those voltage gated sodium channels are going to inactivate. Okay, they're going to inactivate at that point because they're like, whoa, there's no more sodium that needs to come in. Way too much. It's already, that's it. That's the limit. Okay. The club is closed. Okay, no more sodium in. So positive 35 millivolts. That's where it caps it at, and that's what sodium inactivate. The voltage gated sodium channels inactivate, and then the next homies open because you can't chill at positive 35. Bob likes hanging out on the couch at negative 70, and Bob's gonna get what Bob wants. Okay, so voltage gated potassium channels. And they are going to open. And what are they going to do? They're going to let potassium out of the cell. Okay. They're going to push potassium out of the cell. And what's that going to do? That's going to make the inside more negative. And it's going to go all the way down to not negative 70. No, it doesn't, because these voltage gating potassium channels are slow. They are slow. They are slower than Shaquille O'Neal trying to run a 40-yard dash. Okay, they're very slow. So actually, I think Shaquille O'Neal is actually pretty fast. Yeah, he's pretty fast. He's not as fast like Derrick Rose in his prime. Man, I wish I could see like Derrick Rose in his like now if he never like injured himself. I love Derrick Rose so much. All right, so voltage gated potassium channels. They're going to overshoot, is what we say, because they slowly close. They allow a little too much potassium out. You're going to get a little too negative, more negative than actually membrane potential, the resting membrane potential. And you're going to go say negative 90 millivolts. You're going to overshoot it. They're going to be like, just close too late. So they overshoot it, and then what brings you back is our three bad boys over here, the sodium, potassium, ATPase, leaky potassium channel, leaky sodium channel. Boom. They're going to get you back to the good old negative 70 millivolts. Cool. Now, that's what happened, right? We were at negative 70, hit the threshold at negative 55. The voltage gated sodium channels shot up to positive 35. They inactivated. The voltage gated potassium channels opened up. They pushed potassium out to get it more negative. So it went down all the way low to negative because they're slow to close. And then you got to negative 90 millivolts. And then the sodium, potassium, ATPase, leaky potassium channels, and leaky sodium channels did their whole thing. And they're all equilibrated together and to get you back to resting negative 70. All right, now let's go over the graphical representation. And that's the last thing we'll do. All right, so here, let me see if I can go a little more down. Okay, here we have the graph. Okay, this is a graph. You got 0, you got millivolts right here. This is at 0 millivolts, negative 55, negative 70, negative 90. So you're chilling here at negative 70. Bob's chilling at negative 70. He gets a little stimulation. Oh, but if it's not enough, he's just going to equilibrate again using those 3 channels. And then maybe another one, and then 2 more, and then 3 more, and then maybe, not enough. You went to negative 58. Okay, you need to negative 55 it. And then he goes back down, and then say you get a whole bunch. Oh my God, it's crazy. And then you get to negative 55. we're here, folks. This is it. This is the moment of truth. This is when everything goes down. Okay. This is the cream of the crop. This is the good stuff. When you hit negative 55 millivolts, that is threshold. And that, my friends, is when you fire an action potential. What's going to happen in the beginning? The voltage gated sodium channels influx. All right, an influx of sodium from the voltage gated sodium channels. So zoom all the way to positive 35. Okay, so sodium influx. They inactivate. Voltage gated potassium channels open right here. This allows potassium out of the cell, or potassium efflux. Love that word. All the way down. They're slow to close. They go to negative 90, and then they're fully closed. And then the sodium potassium ATPase and the leaky channels, both of them, they equilibrate you back to negative 70, and you're ready for the next action potential. So this side is potassium efflux. And that's an action potential. You got a whole bunch of these little tiny stimulations and inhibitions as well. You can have inhibitions that drop you below negative 70. All right. Yeah, go to negative 55, which is the threshold. Ding, ding, ding. Important zone. This is the fire zone. All right. That all accumulates, and you get enough stimulation at the axon hillock, right? That's where everything accumulates, all that stimulation. And it gets to negative 55, and then boom, the voltage gated sodium channels influx a whole bunch of sodium, which causes you to go all the way positive, hit positive 35. That triggers the voltage gated potassium channels to kick out a whole bunch of potassium efflux. They're slow to close. You get down here, and at negative 90, they're finally fully closed, so everything can equilibrate. You know what I mean. It balances out back to negative 70 millivolts, and you're ready for the next one. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the basics of an action potential. Thank you very much. I'm gonna go hang out with Bob, and we're gonna go watch the game. And I want to eat a big bag of Cheetos. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one.